Welcome everyone to another Art Clinic Online. We have our bi-weekly artist meetings where we discuss art with a different artist each week. We were originally supported by the Maryland State Art Council, Glen Echo Park Partnership for Arts and Cultures, and periodically we get help from art organizations in the area like Montgomery Art Association, who helped us out last week. This week we have Nicole M. Santiago. She is a teacher at Williamsburg College, teaching drawing, color theory, 2D design, and probably more stuff that I'm forgetting. But she's an incredible artist who shows also at the First Street Gallery. Her work to me, I thought was really fascinating. And it's I don't know if Nicole will probably touch on this a little bit when she talks, but the kind of the bridge between still life and figurative work and kind of the blurring the edges between those two. But what I always found interesting about looking at her paintings is kind of the idea of perspective and how that is looked at in her work, looking down on a subject matter. So it's kind of interesting to me about her work is where the viewer is and how they relate to the paintings. So hopefully she'll get to talk a little bit about that today. But without further ado, I'd like to introduce Nicole. Welcome, thanks.
Thank you. First of all, thank you so much for inviting me to give this talk, and thank you to all the people that are here, whether asynchronously or here right now live, that are interested in and want to join me. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so there are three threads that I feel like have gone through my work in the time I worked together over the past 30 years. It makes me sound old, but it is like maybe 25 years. And one is the commitment to painting from observation, right? And that realist tradition. And another is invention. Um, invention and narrative and figure, right? And so all of these three paintings are showing you I'm painting from observation. I'm also inventing a little bit in there. It's not always directly from observation. Some has more invention than the other. And then there's always this narrative thread that drives the work. I didn't paint these, unfortunately, but I thought maybe to start off with a few influences that maybe can help you see how what I'm interested in and how my influences kind of relate back to the work. So I like this. I like what Jordan said about viewpoint, and that's a hit the nail on the head here. So these two images, Tintoretto, Susanna and the Elders, and Gentileschi's Susanna and the Elders. For those of you who don't know, Tintoretto is male, Gentileschi's female. And I really love how the two artists describe this known story. Right? Tintoretto's describing Susanna as permissive and the man over here in the corner, she's permitting him to look upon her, and she's also admiring herself in the mirror. It's like admiring the female as an object in a way, and even this little guy sneaking back here. And then on the right, it becomes about the oppression of these two males looking and objectifying this female and her body posture, pushing them away. Their bodies are pressing down. Both artists divide the picture plane with architectural elements that divide the voyeurs from the subject, but in very different ways. And the composition is driving the narrative. I'm also interested in things that maybe aren't objective or aren't representational. I mean, I get it. This Richard Diebenkorn on the left and this Vuillard on the right are both representational images. But I'm also interested in how representational images can break down into an abstract scaffolding that holds the image together, that's almost divorced somewhat from the the images they're representing, right? I love how this Vouillard breaks down into abstract patterning, and it's about the push and pull of that picture plane. Sometimes the background comes forward and sometimes the foreground goes backwards, and things converge in visually in ways that I find really exciting. And the same thing's happening to Stephen Korn. I love the way we can almost take any angle through a Diebenkorn, and it's like he's planned it. It's like I follow this over and I'm hitting sort of the edge of that curl there and coming out in a certain spot. Like he's really thinking about how he's dividing up that picture plane and the geometry in that picture plane, or like even just this diagonal becomes really important to take us over to that point in the painting. And the same thing's happening in this Vouillard. It's like where we can divide up. Wait, you guys can see my cursor, yes? Okay, where like that arm takes us up across the back of the head, across this hair, and over here, and we're exiting the picture plane here. But then we can take that where we exit and come across, and we're like across the back side of her, that division between the figure's hair and the neck, and where the shadow and the head intersect, and then out this way. And so this is happening all over the picture plane, and that stuff really excites me. And not our last influence here, but the last one I'll show you for a little bit. So Villa of Mysteries. Now, this excites me because of the content and how the content has spanned time, right? So those of you who are not familiar, Villa of Mysteries is in Pompeii in Italy. This fresco got covered by ash from Mount Vesuvius eruption in 78, 79 AD. Scholars think this is like 400 BC, right? So it's super preserved, for hundreds of years, thousands of years, right? And then we come in and excavate it in the 20th century. And here we are with this painting. And so what makes me, and so it's, as you can see, it goes all the way around this room, right? And these figures are larger than life. They're very large. And so if we stretch that out, right, and we just stretch it into a panel, this is the full series from start to beginning, and this little detail down here. And what I like about it is it's just initiation rite, the Dionysian initiation rite for female. And scholars argue about this, and I'm not a scholar about of Pompeii. I'm not going to go into it too much, but what they do agree on is that the figure comes in here, the protagonist. She's presented with a song or a letter or directions. She takes off a little clothes. She makes an offering to these goddesses here. She comes through. She's taking off a little more clothes, and she's doing this dance. And the gesture she's doing is ancient gesture in Middle Eastern dance. And so I assume maybe this with veils, right? And so I assume there's something here, there's some kind of dance or some kind of movement here that may transcend time, right? And so then we come through, and this is the climax, right? This is where the ritual takes place. And so I've expanded it here, and she comes through, and there's Dionysus, and she comes through, and that she's starting to reveal something, and it's a big phallus. If you've ever been to Pompeii, there's phalluses everywhere. It's like whatever, right? So this tracks. And then this winged demon starts whipping her, and as she comes through, she keeps removing articles of clothing. She gets whipped by the demon, less clothing now. She starts to dance with castanets, and then she's over here redressed, combing her hair, and then at the end, she's looking back on this initiation rite she just went through into womanhood. Crazy, right? So I love this for the quality that it's like a modern day comic book with these breaks and the repetition of the figure throughout, and just that, throughout time, there have been these initiation rites for women, men too, but I'm a woman, so I kind of identify with that. So I'm going to paint about that. At that time I made this painting, I was just on the verge of marrying my husband. Wanted to marry my husband. In fact, I proposed. And so that relates to this painting. So I'm thinking about marriage as an initiation rite, but I don't want to paint directly about that. That's kind of lame, right? So I'm making a painting. I'm thinking about color and composition, and first that has to work before the story, right? So I make this fake cake, and it's like a tiered cake. I'm like, oh, it's gonna be a birthday cake, but also a wedding cake, right? So this is called birthday scene, and it became about this. The narrative of the painting is about a birthday scene, right? But it's layered, and it is also alluding to initiation rite of marriage. I don't expect the viewer to get that, and that's okay. That's for me, right? That's for me. But if they get it, that's great, and some people do. So I was thinking about this moment where the protagonist presents the food to the goddesses, that beginning of her initiation right into womanhood. And so thinking about that presentation of the cake in my painting as paralleling that in a way. And the figure here, is me, but I made my head a little bigger, so it looked like maybe more juvenile. So it's like a juvenile birthday party, and I put myself in this pink party dress. As I'm developing the painting, things are constantly changing and moving. There used to be Pin the Tail and the donkey back here, and I'm like, no, I need something blue back there. I need something blue. And so I'm like, oh, I just put a map up. And then the cake came in, and I moved that all around, and it ended up being right there. And of course, the red wall is um, not an overt um, reference to the Villa of Mysteries, that fresco that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about the lamp as that always, when the lamp enters my paintings, it's usually at a time of transition, and I think that's a subconscious thing that happens in my work, but I kind of know that happens now. So I'm like, okay, that's a transition. Um, and the birthday girl here is sort of opening her present, right? And so in this, I'm thinking about the presentation of the cake. That cake confections are often consumed or presented at any of life major mile markers, birthday shower, birthday, retirement, even wakes. We don't have a cake, but we usually have some kind of confection, retirements, whatever, anniversaries. And so I'm using that as a marker of transition, like a milestone in the figure's life. And also, like, layered under this, I'm thinking, okay, um, is this about family? Is this about marriage? The figure's looking at the cake, like kind of like, I don't know, and like, not, this isn't for every person. This marriage is for women more than men, seen as a thing that has to happen, or that the women sometimes feel pressured by family. Um, and so I wanted that ambiguity to be there. The baby, why the baby and the bag, the doll is like the idea of family, and it's sort of kind of over where womb would be. And is she rejecting and putting it back in the bag, or is she taking it out and accepting it? The bag in the front is like things yet to come. We don't quite know what's in there, but we get a little peek. There's something red in there. Again, that was a compositional idea to connect red in the foreground and red in the background, but also to pique interest, what's in there, what's coming. And the candles that overlap that map, it's like she's burning a particular trajectory by going through with this pathway of marriage and family. There's a particular trajectory that now is not possible. She's taking a different route. So again, see what I mean? It sounds kind of like about marriage, but it's not. It's just taking in all of what maybe might be expectations and pressures put upon women, overlapped with thinking about the rites of passage, with the Villa of Mysteries, and kind of disguised in this birthday scene. I did another painting based on this part of the Villa of Mysteries, where the figure is offering up food to the gods, and but also overlapped with my own thoughts and feelings about that particular time in my life. And again, it was about marriage, and so the tiered cake kind of represents a wedding cake, but we have balloons and presents, so maybe it also relates to a birthday party. I didn't want it to be super overt. But the figure protagonist in my painting is passing from one space to another, hence the door. The door has, if paint with natural and incandescent light, you'll recognize there's natural light hitting the door, but on the other side of the door is incandescent, two different spaces, is what I'm trying to imply. The balloons sort of over the womb was a reference to family and what is this woman walking into? Who's she giving her offering to? Right. So again, just about life transitions in maybe the course of a woman's life. And like I said, I noticed over the years that anytime I sort of put a lamp in, it always seems like that happens at a time of transition. And, this isn't a conscious thing. When I make setups, when I have these things set up in my studio, things come in and out, things move in and out. Like the balloons weren't here initially. And I'm like, I need some green and white there, I think. And so I just tape balloons to, a tripod. Just didn't pay the tripod, and I'm like, oh wait, if I move them this way, it'll be like womb shape, and I get all these ideas. And same with this, the light wasn't in there, the arm wasn't in there. It was more about a portrait. It was more about a portrait of myself with still life objects. I'm like, no, I need a lamp. I need a lamp. I'm like, oh yeah, I got a lamp because this is, again, we're coming back to, I was, transitioning from one part of my life to another. And, again, talking about life transitions and mile markers for women, also talking about the contrast between painting from direct observation and painting from my memory, my imagination. This painting is, I really wanted to do a really long vertical or horizontal painting. Again, thinking back to the Villa of Mysteries, the reds come out, but the long horizontal format and the breaks. It's like the breaks, the breaks, the breaks, but the breaks become architectural and figurative rather than black lines like in the Villa of Mysteries. I'm thinking about the protagonist repeating through the composition. And when I started this painting, I had recently found out I was pregnant, and I was thinking about Annunciation imagery. And I was thinking, oh, one painter telling the other painter or the other person that she's with child. Like I think about the Christian story where Mary was told, hey, guess what? You're pregnant. And she's like, oh, really? So I was thinking about that, like in the art history, thinking about those moments. And so that's what's happening here. And then I was thinking about marriage and family. So again, the figure here. And then as I was painting this, I had a miscarriage. And it was sort of devastating. And I was thinking, it just seems it was hard to wrap my head around that a person that I didn't know, but yet I know so well, had passed. And it was super confusing. It was super confusing. I'm like, did this person exist really? Or did they not exist? And if they did, where did they go? Who took them? It was like I was trying to figure that out. And I'm making this painting at the same time. And I'm like, who's the taker of these babies? And so this is the person leading the child away. And so I'm thinking about this space back here as like a spirit world or whatever, and that the dog can pass. This was my dog at the time. That the dog can pass in between these two worlds, and so the dog watches and guards as the baby's taken away, and the dog is also with me, the protagonist, trying to search out what was lost, right? And so that's that middle thing, like where did it go? What's going on? I can't like understand. And then the morning and the dog again, like being able to see what's to come and what's in the past, like our spiritual world, but also in the same space as the figures. And then and like I want it to have a happy ending, so that it's like, okay, the pregnant belly back here, and the baby carriage looking into the baby carriage. And the protagonist being back, like guarding the baby carriage. So like there was another child. All this, I'm observing, but I'm also inventing. Same thing here. And in this one, I use total photo reference for the dog. Is no way your dog does not hold still. It just doesn't happen, right? And so, like this is all invented. The baby's somewhat invented, somewhat drawing, somewhat photograph. The space is somewhat observed. But again, I'm thinking about how I can how I can divide up the picture plane and that read in an abstract way to hold everything together. I'm also thinking about where things line up to tell the story. Right. So it's called nap time. It's like, who's nap time? The dog's nap time? The baby's nap time? What's going on? Who's this figure back here? And, so I want it to feel like a scene that could be possible, but I'm also thinking symbolically, like the baby's kind of standing on the womb two-dimensionally, and the mother is, knitting this cord like an umbilical cord. And is this person coming to help or leaving? Or do they have some ominous reason to be there? I'm also thinking about the upper register of a painting or areas near the head as psychological space and that pushing the narrative. Again, I don't expect every person to look at this to get that or to understand, but for first and foremost, it has to serve as a picture as a whole, in a way that's pleasing visually, and then people will get what they will out of it. And another painting related to the miscarriages, which I didn't really realize I was doing at the time. I think the subconscious has a big role if you are open to listening to it while you're painting. And you should, because sometimes you'll paint things you don't really want out there. But I made this triptych here that, and I was thinking, when I first started, I was thinking about overindulgence and how when we overindulge in anything, we become sort of paralyzed or it's never a good thing. Too much of a good thing is never okay. And so I was thinking about that with cakes and sweets and food, and I've been painting these fake and real cakes in other paintings, and I'm like, I just want like this, like you're looking down, and I want it to be like more, even though it's representational, a little more abstracted, so it felt like the viewer was laying horizontally but above in the air, like above, like looking straight down. And how was I going to do this? And it felt important that it was me, that it was a portrait of myself. So, I hired a model to sit and to lie in this dress. And then I took photographs of myself. And so I used the color from the model and the drawing of my head to kind of put this together. And then all these things were in my studio on the floor. They weren't all painted together. They weren't all together. Like I pull them underneath me and sort of paint. It was really hard to do, which is probably why there's only 3 like this. But as I'm painting it, I'm realizing, I'm like, these feel really mournful and melancholy. Like, what's going on here? I thought, oh, I'm not just painting about overindulgence and too much of a good thing. I'm painting about birthdays that aren't going to be celebrated. Like at this point, I think I'd had 2 miscarriages. And so I'm like painting about these, I'm kind of mourning a little bit. And I really didn't realize that when I'd started it. Like I said, when I started, I was really thinking about this painting, The Land of Cockaigne, and this is the last art historical reference I'll give you. But I love this painting. It's like these inhabitants, everything is, they've overindulged and they're lying there and like, oh, I feel miserable. I can't move. I'm paralyzed. And so that was the impetus, right, for this work. That and the idea of abstracting and looking down more. But other things arose. When I got to this painting, there was this gesture across the abdomen. And, as I was painting it, I felt like the hand was meant to be lying on the belly, but it felt like it was sort of hovering above. And I'm like, you know what, I'm not going to correct that because I like that there's an empty space there. And I think it's adding to the content. Um, and I was thinking about that enunciation portion of that long horizontal vertical. I hired a model, and I'm like, I'm gonna make an enunciation drawing. And so this is a big drawing on canvas, actually, with charcoal and acrylic. And I was thinking about, I really liked that gesture, and it sort of inspired the next painting. Eventually, I had a pregnancy that worked at 2. And so I felt like, all these paintings are sort of melancholy and depressing, and I wanted to make kind of a celebratory painting, a happy painting. And I felt like it needed to relate back to those others. And so that was the reason for this one. It's called Baby Cakes. And the more pregnant I became, the less willing I was to like, just lay on the floor and take multiple photos and I like didn't want the model to come in and lie that because it's like, I might be working for 30 minutes and need to take a nap. And I've hired this model for 3 hours, so there's not napping in the studio. So I decided to just work on still life for a while. And so this was sort of another one, like, let's make a happy one that relates to the other ones. And as you put things in like the bag you can't see into, like what's coming, and the 8 ball. It's like, I don't know if you guys played with these when you were little. I did. I still do. My kids do. Right. The magic 8 ball, like what's gonna happen? You don't really know what's gonna happen. It's all big adventure. Baby came. It's really hard to paint with a baby. Super hard. And a dog with one eye. So anyway, my child didn't sleep until she was 4. Neurologist said it'll pass, but it's a brain wiring thing. I mean, literally half-hour increments. No book, no doctor could help. And I couldn't do it. I could only work on small little paintings. And so I'd bring her in and I'd have these setups. I'd photograph her in the setup and keep the setup and work from the setup and have the drawing of her and kind of look at my flesh to try and figure out what those colors were. I cannot do color from a photograph. It never works for me. It's like I've got to see those things. So I did a series of these. Occasionally she would sleep, but like I said, it was only for half an hour. And sometimes you're just like, screw it. There's no point in me taking a nap. No point at all. I might as well just stay here. So very little tiny paintings happen at this time. Then she got a little bigger. And I'm like, my life feels crazy because she's still not sleeping. I'm teaching. Now my dog's got no eyeballs. She lost both of them. And I'm like, blind old dog and kid that doesn't sleep and with ADHD, bouncing off the walls. And I'm like, oh my God, how do I do this? I'm like, I'm just gonna make painting about it. And so this is called Second Time Around, not only because of the new pregnancy. So I got pregnant again because I don't know, because I thought I would torture myself with all this. And so I thought the second time around, second pregnancy, but also this is a painting that it was a large painting I did about 10 years prior. And I took it off my shelf, my racks, and I'm like, I need to go back into this. And as I did, my current life populated the painting. I think yeah. So this is what it was before. I took it down and I'm like, I just want to repaint this. I don't like this. I want to do something else. It's a pretty big painting. And I didn't know what was going to happen, but this is what happened. So I'm thinking about my daughter feels like she's all over the place everywhere, doesn't sleep, bouncing off the walls, and here I am pregnant again. And I have people ask me, they're like, well, why did the stripes stop on the legs? And I'm like, because she's too damn tired to finish her stripes. But really it was a compositional decision, right? I was like, those stripes there, I put them in, I'm like, it doesn't work. It's too much. They need to stop right there. So when I'm doing these, yes, things are representational, but I'm also thinking about the abstract composition. I'm thinking about how the yellows move around. When I was painting, I'm thinking about, I need a pink up here. What can it be? Balloons float. That'll work, right? I'm drawing this in and I decided I like the flatness of the drawn figure back there. I don't want volume in that figure. I'm just going to let it be. I'm going to let that be drawn as if it's kind of in and out of the space, not really in the space. The hand doesn't need to be attached, does it? It's a painting. Can't you do whatever you want? So I'm like, well, maybe this is more like she was here and now she's here, so I felt like I was taking risks and I was so tired. I didn't care if it made sense as long as it worked for me. So that kind of led to some other things. Um, and I took, remember this painting that was up there on the racks too. And I think I was just too overwhelmed to start a brand new, bigger painting. So I pulled it down. I'm like, I don't like the way that dog's painted. It really bothers me and embarrasses me a little bit. So I'm going to take that out. So I started painting it and I'm like, yeah, maybe I don't like that figure either. So I hired a model and she came in. She came in, I did a little study. At this time I had a little boy and a little girl, and I'm like, I think I want my daughter in this. And so, I took a picture of my daughter and I set up mannequins at my studio and put her in here. A little mannequin with a dark wig, and I have like a 3-year-old size mannequin, put a little shirt on it, and put her in, and ended up being this, And I'm painting it. There's a lamp, but it's not on. I'm like, I feel like I'm at a point of transition. And sure enough, shit hit the fan. Like life just got really crazy pretty much like right after I made that painting. Um, so I'm doing, and like life is entering the paintings and I'm letting it, thinking about this is the mannequin, but standing in for my daughter, like lessons I'm trying to teach her, like you hold the hand, like, no, don't do that. Right. The chaos. I feel like the paintings just became about chaos, and movement and around picture plane. So as much about the two-dimensional abstraction as it was about how I felt, life with 2 little kids, not enough sleep, and a job and a studio practice to maintain, and a blind dog. And grandparents who came to move next door who were starting to experience dementia and health problems. So it just got really compounded, And again, like that one where I didn't attach the hand, I'm like, I don't need hands. You don't need hands to attach. So, like I'm like, do I have to finish the stripe? Do I have to attach the hand so that carries on in? And I have a few progress shots. I usually don't paint on stretched canvas. I paint on sized linen, and I attack it to a board because I like to expand and contract the composition as I'm working. So these are sort of progress shots. And just to show you how I'm thinking about composition, with my kids, I'll take photographs because they're never going to hold still. And then now my daughter's old enough, or even in this one, she was old, and I think she was 4 at the time or 5, and she would come in and sit, and I give her cupcakes, and she'd eat the cupcake and play games while I could look at her color. And so I'll bring in, and I'll go into Photoshop, and I'll move stuff around to try and figure out what I want to do with the composition. So like I said, things got really chaotic. Son got diagnosed with like 9 severe food allergies and asthma, and he's a little guy, and it was scary. Grandparents are living next door to me. I'm helping my mother take care of them. There's a lot going on. There's a lot of hospital visits, and I call these, they're titled wrong here. They're supposed to be called pacifier. And it's like, who can I pacify? Do I pacify the grandparents with the pills? Do I treat my son's asthma and pacify him? Do I give a crayon to my daughter? Do I give a pacifier to my son? What's my pacifier? I guess it's coffee. And coffee started to become, when in these still lives, coffee started to become me in the still life. And so I started to see these still lives as portraits of people, or portraits of my family situation. And my dad got sick with a terminal illness. I'm like, come on, life. Like, can we stop hitting me with things? And so I started painting about this, right? So it's back and forth, he lived far away, and it's back and forth between Virginia and Indiana, trying to take care of him, making sure grandparents okay, making sure kid gets all of his allergy shot appointments and asthma treatments and all of this. And it's just got to be a lot. And the coffee cup always sneaks in. I'm like, the coffee cup's me. The inhaler starts to become my son. The medications start to become my grandparents and my father. And the ashtray starts to represent my father. Right. And the light, we're in transition. And my father was, they were like, yeah, he's terminal, he's going. So, you need to like make your peace and get affairs settled. And it became that whole thing became pretty complicated with a bunch of things that were happening. And I said, I really want to make a portrait of my father. And so I started making this, and I was painting this when he was actively dying, and it was back and forth from Indiana to Virginia. When I came back home, I paint on this, and then I go back to Indiana to take care of him, came back home and painted on this. And I'm like, I feel, felt like I was such a part of all of this. And there's symbolism with all of these things, like the remote control becomes about control or lack of control. The toolbox, yeah, he was a mechanic and a steel worker, and that tracks, but it's also about trying to fix things that are broken. The 3 beer cans, he was a avid beer drinker. And so the 3 beer cans were like, the 3 states, like one is empty and crushed, like things in life that are done and can't be corrected. One is spilled, things in life that have been experienced and maybe are actively still being experienced. And the one that's not open, like things yet to come. So there's symbolism in all of this. There's a little detail. And so, this end of life progresses, um, I paint more and more images about this. They're portraits of him, but also a snapshot of just life, just what's happening in my life. I felt like figures, I couldn't express this with figures, and that it would be too overt. And that's not what I want. I want this to just be read as a still life, and the viewer can bring to it what they want. I'm sure they're going to bring up masculine with this, and I'm sure it's going to bring up chaos with this. And that's fine if that's as far as it goes. A little study. I'm also still really interested about color and light and composition. The narrative changes sometimes when I'm painting, but first and foremost, it's color, light, composition. Those are the things that are the most important. And then the narrative will change and it will become whatever. But that's first and foremost, that has to read. All right. I was thinking about my son here and the little fire truck. I had to be away from him for his 3rd birthday to take care of my dad. And I was always like, oh, yeah, fire truck. We are definitely in emergency level right now. So other more pleasant things. So after I felt like I got that out of my system, I'm like, oh, okay, I need to do something that's not heavy because all that was so heavy. So I just went back to what I know, right? So I went back to painting from observation without much invention. Just let me hire a model. Let me hire a model and just paint the model. I just need a break, right? And let me try to paint the psychology of this sitter. I paint my kids, like I said, they'll sit, but they move. So I use a photograph to help me with the drawing, but they're still sitting there so I can see the color and light and understand. Lots of cupcakes, lots of iPad. I'm also just painting interiors and trying to think about the psychology of that interior and what inhabitants may be in that interior, which I'm the inhabitant, but I just felt so good to kind of like not paint something so heavy. And that's pretty much where the work is now. I go to a model session every Thursday night and draw from the model. Most of the time I can control the setup. So, I think about things I want to draw. But this model's for my life drawing students so they can complete their homework, but I draw with them. I have dog props. I got lots of props. And I do think about the content. I think about it, is there content here? What's going on with the figure? Um, but but again, like right now, things are a little bit lighter. I think they'll remain that way for a little bit. So these are all the images. Hopefully I didn't speed through too quick. I don't want to take up your whole day. But do people have questions or comments?
Sort of an arbitrary question. I was thinking about your lamp in there and kind of wondering if it might be a Christian reference, like the lampstand and the source of light and things like that.
It could be. I mean, I haven't really thought about that. I don't think if it is, it's conscious. I was raised in a Christian home. I don't practice Christianity or maybe can consider myself Christian, but I do have that experience and knowledge. So that's a good question. It might possibly be something like that, like spiritual in some way.
Nicole, this is kind of a question that may not be relevant to everybody, but like, how much is your teaching, your upbringing, I know the instructors at IU and how they paint, and I can see a lot of the cross pollination, and even the education that I received at IU, Indiana University. There was a big stress about the classicals relating to the current. Is that where it kind of started for you? Is like, why are we still looking at Renaissance painting? It's like so old and so passe, but it's still relevant in an abstract form. Do you still credit that education at IU, or is that something you kind of figured out on your own?
No, yeah, it's directly related. Yeah, I mean, I wish I could say I double majored in art history, but I didn't. I minored. So, but it did take a lot of the classes. No, it totally relates, and I can't understand why one doesn't think that it does. I'm always baffled by that. Um, there's so much. There's so many wild things happening throughout the history of art. I mean, crazy wild things that are so contemporary yet not. And I mean, if you don't study those, you don't know when you're repeating them. Also, I mean, we build on the shoulders of giants, right? So you take that and you build upon it. You get ideas from it, and no, it's so relevant, and it so influences everything I do. Yeah, it was IU. Yeah.
Uh, I guess the other question, whenever you're composing for still life, and more specifically, these are kind of portraits, and I think of like Portrait of Emile Zola, things like that, in the art history kind of spectrum. Do you feel like you're able to capture a person better painting them like me painting a figure directly, or do you find it better to capture a personality or a person through objects?
Ooh, that's a good question. Sometimes objects, I think if it's a direct, like, like, sorry, like these, I feel like objects say more than if I'm just doing like, bust, portrait. Um, but when they get into an environment, then I feel like I can say more about the figure. Well, I mean, because there's objects, right? Yeah.
I was really struck by your conscious, it's like chocolate, vanilla, or black and sort of cream color where all the stripes were in the composition, and you had that light iced chocolate cake and all of that very selective color palette in that particular piece. Um, do you mind, or is there something further that you have to share about all the stripes and everything that are worked into it, as well? Just the whole.
Oh, okay. So why the stripes going through? Yeah. Well, I think I was thinking when I was painting this one, I wasn't sure what it was about, but I knew I wanted to paint it. And things kept going back in and out. I started with just this. This was a setup right here for my life drawing class. And this was the model that was there. And I was like, oh my God, I got to paint this. It's just the color, right? And I love that green back there. I'm on a balcony over a lake, and there's all these woods, and it's all green. And the way this was blue, and all the yellows moving through, and the green of the floor, I was just like excited visually. And so classes ended for the semester, and I set this up in the classroom and started painting it. I don't know what was going to happen. And I just started painting this with enough room on the canvas that I could expand if I wanted to. And I'm like, wait a minute, I need something up here. And wait a minute, I think I need stripes. It was intuitive. I was just like, and I don't know that it really, I'm on the fence about whether or not it really works, but like you can't knock it out of the park every time, and you just got to move forward. So I'm like, okay, well, and then I thought I need something, I need a vertical here. It needs to be dark, light, and then, pull down and overlap. And so I put this is a mannequin actually. And then I set my daughter down here. I'm like, nah, I want to pull the figure forward, because I was thinking about that other second time around painting. And I'm like, I want to do that again. And this side just died. I don't know. I couldn't remedy that side. And I thought, well, maybe the stripes would pull it across. And then it really wasn't working. And I thought, well, I could put balloons in the corner. That would like pull the yellow back up there. I'm still not sure it's working. But you know, that the idea was like a movement across this way, that you pull across this way. And then abstractly, these stripes would relate in a minor way, the striping back there. So does that answer your question?
Nicole, how does one read and research design and know the knowledge you know about design?
Oh boy, I don't know. I feel like that's a lifelong pursuit. I feel like I'm just beginning, like at the tip of the iceberg. I mean, I think Itten is a wonderful color theorist, and I think studying him helped, Johannes Itten. I think Joseph Albers is wonderful at color, and I think understanding color is like half the battle. That beast is so complicated. Um, you know, there's a man named an author named Jay Hambidge, and he writes about dynamic symmetry. Have I read all the way through his books? No, bits and pieces. But and other books on dynamic symmetry. I think that is informative. When I teach composition to my students, I mean, just drill down into them. You must understand Gestalt theory. You must. And if you don't, we got a problem. So, you know, like that's sort of, those are the things that I find important when I'm talking to students about composition. I mean, you could dig into it forever, I guess.
I think I have all those books, and I haven't maybe read all of Albers, but that's probably it.
Well, I haven't read all of Hambidge books. He gets into the math and my brain shuts down. So
Yeah, well, I think it's what's striking most about your paintings is to me, it's so like it's on the verge of chaos. And I always tell students, oh my gosh, you need to place your eye to rest in that composition. And I don't miss it though. Like I can argue like the center is a place for your eye to rest in your painting, but it's still got a lot of things and a lot of things happening. And it typically chaos is hard to organize. And I think you always do it in every painting is just incredibly well presented and organized, and colors repeating and patterns repeating, and it's just absolutely a joy to look at. So
oh, well, thank you. I don't feel like it always works myself, and I'm embarrassed, like, just so you know, every single piece that I put up here, I'm embarrassed about, but I think that's
because it's
just,
yours.
this is yours, yeah, this is mine. But, I think, you know, I talk to my students a lot about, visual grouping, and that if you don't have, you know, you have to have unity, even if you have like thousands of things. How are you going to visually group it together? Maybe I'm doing that somewhat when there's a lot of things. I don't know. Maybe I'm not sure, but
I have a question. This is Mariana. Hi, I love your paintings and I love the trajectory you presented it to us. Thank you so much, Nicole. I want to ask you how you came to, how does your sort of painting career intertwine with teaching, and did you find that it sort of facilitates
oh yeah, sure.
in your
Well, yeah, absolutely. So I here at the college, I rarely teach painting. So it was a drawing position and that I was hired to teach, but occasionally it's a small department. And when our painting professor, maybe some of you know John Lee, is a painter, very, very good. When you know, he's gone on leave or whatnot, I've taken over some of his painting classes, but mostly I teach color theory and drawing. So these images are all done, you know, with students at our night drawing sessions, and it's like, and at our university, my studio space is in a teaching building, so the students can literally just walk down the hall and knock on my door. What are you working on? They don't do it often, but I always invite them to. They meet with me in my studio about whatever. I don't have an office. My office is my studio. So they're in and out of the studio. I've had students say, I don't really understand how to mix color. I'm like, okay, after class, come down to my studio and we'll do a demo. So I think the making and the teaching are a little embedded. If I'm getting ready to have a show and I pulled my works down from the racks and they're sitting out I'm getting ready to wrap them up. I have students come in. I'm like, I got all these pieces pulled. Come look and see, because I'm teaching you how to do this. Come look and see how I do it. And they see me fail all the time. I go in and make a drawing on Thursday night model session and throw it away because it's so bad. So they see me fail, they see me struggle, too. So all that's good, I think.
Enriching for students. Thank you. It's
Yeah,
great.
sure.
And so when you paint the big paintings, what motivates you? I know the drama in life, which comes to all of us, it did to a great extent, but then will you sort of pause drawing and say, okay, I'm going to paint for myself?
Oh, it goes back and forth. I think I tend to be focused on one or the other, but it does go back and forth. I think I like painting a little better, but I think I'm better at drawing. So, I mean, I think I'm chasing something with painting that's a little bit unattainable and it's just out of my reach. And it's just like I'm always chasing it and I don't quite get it. And so then you get like a tiny little dopamine squirt, like you almost got it, but you didn't quite get it. So it makes you want to do it again. I think it's like gambling. You think
I
you're
was
gonna
always told your painting should be one step, or your drawing should be one step of your painting. But it's always that. I always think it's the painting gods are giving you a little bit of taste of ambrosia, and then they'll like, nope, sorry, that's ours.
Yes.
Nikki, can I say something real quick? I was fortunate enough to go to undergrad at Indiana University with Nikki. We were in the BFA together. And I think a couple things is just I love your work, obviously, and your talk and everything. It's interesting. I know when I was at IU scale, we had to work so big. And it's so interesting. You still have that, but even seeing some of these really small, like 4 inches by 6 inches or whatever. And I'm trying to think, when did you allow yourself to work like that? And it kind of, at least with me, there was so much, and I don't know, Jordan, if you were like this too, there was so much kind of indoctrination a little bit in terms of size or in terms of just how to work. And so kind of, when did you get that freedom back? And I had one, and also it's interesting to see how these have been kind of the impetus of all these works was there at IU, I feel, in undergrad when we were in our 20s. I remember you doing one about your grandmother, but anyway, that's just an observation.
No, you're right. And yeah, all of it is, and by the way, I love your work too. All of it is, you're right. It's the same. I didn't show undergrad works or graduate works, but yeah, this is something that the subject matter keeps continuing. I did like a grieving portrait of a grandmother or still life. But when I was in graduate school, I was making these big paintings and they were failing like bad, like that first semester in graduate school when you're super lost, and man, were they failing. And I had remembered a graduate student when I was at IU in undergrad painted these little like 3-inch portraits, and she made like, I don't know, dozens and dozens of them. And so I decided I'm going to do that. And it'll be my warm up every day because the big paintings are horrible. I might as well, like maybe if I warm up. So I started doing these 2-inch by 3-inch portraits, and I gave myself an hour. And when they were done, they were done. When the hour was up, I had to set them on the shelf. And I ended up, having like 100 of them or something. And faculty and visiting artists would come in my studio and they would sort of like look at the big ones and just kind of be like, oh. And then they'd look over on these shelves with all these little paintings. They'd talk about that the whole time. I'm like, no, that's not artwork. That's a warm up. Talk about the big stuff. So I ended up throwing all the big paintings away. I think that's when I realized that it's okay if it's small. Yeah, but you're right. There was a pressure to paint really big. And I'm glad there was that pressure because didn't it force you, Aaron? It's like, okay, let's do it. Let's stretch a 6-foot canvas and see what happens.
Absolutely. But that's been so, I don't know, exciting about your work, I think, that you maintain that kind of um just ambition and success and everything with the big ones, but then also allow these little thoughts or something with the little ones. So no, very impressive, Nikki.
Oh, thanks. It looks like there's some chats. Oh, okay. Oh, I got it. Okay, never mind. Not chats. I need to read. Okay.
Well, unless there's any more questions, I want to say thank you so much. This is a blast with a pastor talking about IU stuff, by the way. Beautiful presentation. I was grateful that you were able to talk so openly about your work and kind of where it came from. Like I've already raved about how amazing it is. So thank you so much for talking to us, and we're excited to have you come host some ACO talks with Aaron later. That'll be great.
She's really good.
Thank you so much. This was wonderful.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much.
So thank you again, and we will see you all maybe in 2 weeks? Question mark. If not, we definitely have Michiko Fowler. She's a Japanese artist now living in DC. Does weird hyper realism kind of window paintings that are fabulous. Coming up in early March, and then we'll kind of keep you posted on what's happening in late February. But thank you again, everyone, and we'll see you next time.
And I want to thank again our donors among our audience, because they've been so incredibly helpful. Thank you so much, as well as our supporters from organizations. But I really, really thank you so much.
Thank you so much.
Thanks, guys.
Bye, everyone.